Hello friends, now we will start the practice paper for mathematics for 12th standard. Now these are the general instruction. विद्यार्थी मित्रों, तुम्ही या सर्व general instruction वाचू शकताय. Okay. Now this is the first section A. That is question number 1 contains 8 multiple choice type of questions, each carrying 2 marks. Okay. आणि या व्हिडिओमध्ये मी सेक्शन ए कन्सिडर करणार आहे आणि त्यामध्ये लॉजिक या चॅप्टर वरती कोणत्या टाइपचे क्वेश्चन्स बोर्डाच्या परीक्षेला विचारले जाऊ शकतात आणि त्यामध्ये सर्वप्रथम लॉजिक साठी तुम्हाला ही फॉर्म्युलीज सर्वाधिक महत्त्वाची आहे. तुम्ही याचे स्क्रीनशॉट काढू शकताय. जर हे फॉर्म्युलीज तुम्हाला माहिती असतील तरच यावरची तुम्हाला मल्टिपल चॉईस क्वेश्चन सॉल्व करता येतील एमसीक्यू आणि त्याचबरोबर सीईटी साठी देखील हे सर्वाधिक इम्पॉर्टंट आहे. नाउ विल स्टार्ट द फर्स्ट चॅप्टर लॉजिक. हे टोटल 8 मार्क्स साठी लॉजिक चॅप्टर आहे. नाउ विल स्टार्ट द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन. P and Q implies R is logically equivalent to, these are the options. Now we'll solve this. Okay. Now P and Q implies R is equivalent to, that is, we know that when there is a P implies Q, then it is equivalent to negation of P or Q. Okay. By using this result, we will write here that is a negation of the first statement. Therefore, we write here negation of P and Q or R or Q, similarly or R. Now here we are operating negation to P and Q. Then you will get negation of P or negation of Q or R. Okay. Now the next negation of P or in bracket negation of Q or R. Okay. Now the next, that is the negation of P or in bracket negation of Q or R. It means that P implies in bracket negation of Q or R by using this result. What is that? Negation of P or Q is equals to or is equivalent to P implies Q. And similarly, by using this result, we write that P implies in bracket negation of Q or R. And next, again negation of Q or R means what? Q implies R, again by using the same result, and hence option A is a correct one. Okay, या ठिकाणी option A कसा आहे तर तो it's a correct one. Now the next example, negation of A union B is equals to B is sufficient condition for A is subset of B is, which of the option is the correct one? Now first see this here. The conditional statement P implies Q can be written in any of the following ways, and this is the way. If P then Q, P implies Q, but here we required that the P is a sufficient condition for Q. It means that A union B is equals to B implies A is a subset of B, and therefore we write here if A union B is equals to B, then A is a subset of B. Now we want to write the negation of this given statement. Okay, that is the negation of A union B is equals to B is a sufficient condition for A is a subset of B. Therefore, we'll write here the negation of implication. What is the negation of the implication? That is a, if the given statement is a P implies Q. Okay, symbolic form काय असणार त्याचा? P implies Q. मग त्याचा निगेशन काय असणार आहे? निगेशन ऑफ P implies Q is equivalent to P and negation Q. म्हणजे काय की पहिली स्टेटमेंट ही आपली काय असणार आहे? This is the P and this is the Q. We want to write P and negation Q. Keep this P as it is means what? A is a subset of A union B is equals to B. Keep it as this P as it is, but we require here negation of Q means what? A is a not subset of B, and hence the negation of this given statement is, that is a union B is equals to B and A is a not subset of B. That is the option A is a correct one. Okay. Now the next question. पुन्हा तुम्ही एकदा बघू शकताय. पण त्यातला P is a sufficient condition for the P and therefore the given statement is a P implies Q. That's a negation. Okay. Negation of P implies Q is equals to P and negation Q. And hence keep P as it is. आणि Q चा आपल्याला negation find out करायचं आहे. That is A is not subset of B. And hence option A is a correct one. Now the next. The negation of inverse of negation of P implies Q is. Okay. Negation and the inverse. Okay. Now just see this first. First inverse. Okay. Inverse of negation of P implies Q is. That is a negation of P implies negation of Q. That is we first find. आपल्याला काय find out करायचं पहिल्यांदा inverse find out करायचं या स्टेटमेंटचा. Okay. And therefore we are writing first the inverse of negation of P implies Q. मग याचा inverse find out करणार. मग inverse कसा find out केला जातो? Inverse of P implies Q means what? Negation of P implies negation of Q. म्हणजे आहे त्या स्टेटमेंटला आपल्याला negation apply करायचं आहे. That is the negation of P implies negation of Q. Okay. Now negation of P is original statement implies negation Q. Now next we want to find out the negation. Now this negation of P implies negation Q. Okay. Therefore the negation of P implies negation Q is a negation in bracket P implies negation Q. But what is the negation of P implies Q is equivalent to P and negation Q. या प्रकारे. And therefore here we write here P as it is and negation of Q and negation of Q. But here already there is a negation. Therefore negation in bracket negation of Q. Negation of negation Q is a Q and therefore we have the P and Q and hence the optional A is a correct one. Okay. पुन्हा तुम्ही एकदा बघू शकताय. First we find out the inverse of this statement and then find out the negation. आपण इथे first inverse find out केला आणि या inverse चा काय find out केल्यानंतर negation find out केला. Then we get P and Q. Okay. Now the next. The negation of P and Q implies R is. Okay. Now again the negation of P and Q implies R and that is equals to negation of P or negation of Q implies R. Simply we are applying the negation apply करणार आपण. याला negation मिळणार. And चा काय झालं तर or तयार झाला इथे. And negation of Q implies R. Okay. Negation of P as it is. Okay. Or as it is. Now the negation of Q implies R. What is the negation of P implies Q? Negation of P implies Q is a P and negation Q. And similar here Q and negation of R by using this result. And hence the option D is a correct one. That is the negation of P or in bracket Q and negation of R. Okay. Now the next question. Negation of P and Q implies R is. Okay. Now here is the same question. See this here. Negation of P and Q implies R. Negation of P and Q implies R. But their options are different. Now see this here. First here we find out the negation of P and Q implies R. Again we will apply the negation sign. It is equivalent to negation of P or this and will become or negation of Q implies R. Now the negation of Q implies R means what? Q and negation of R by using this result. That is the negation of implication is equals to P and negation Q. Okay. Negation of Q implies R is again P, Q and negation of R. Okay. Now the next. That is the negation of P or in bracket Q and negation of R. This is nothing but P implies in bracket Q and negation of R by using the result. What is that result? Negation of P or Q is equivalent to P implies Q. And therefore, and therefore negation of P or Q is equals to P implies Q. By using this result, we will write this P implies in bracket Q and negation of R. Okay, and hence the option D is a correct one. Now the next question. Inverse of statement pattern P or Q implies P and Q is. If we have the conditional statement, that is the P implies Q is a conditional statement, then negation of P implies negation Q is its inverse. Okay. Now we have this conditional statement. We want to find out its inverse. Therefore, negation of its inverse is negation in bracket P or Q implies negation of P and Q. Now here we apply the negation. That is the negation of P or Q means what? Negation of P. This or will become and negation of Q implies negation of P and Q means what again? That is the negation of P. This and will become or negation Q. Okay. And hence the option C is a correct one. That's the option C is a correct one. But here we are finding the inverse of this statement. That is a P implies, if the conditional statement is a P implies Q, then its inverse is negation of P implies negation Q. या प्रकारे आपण ते फाइंड आउट करत असतो. म्हणून प्रत्येक ठिकाणी मी फॉर्म्युलेज लिहिले तुम्हाला ते समजण्यासाठी. Now the next question. The negation of inverse of negation of P implies Q is. First we find out the inverse of this statement. Okay. The negation of inverse of negation of P implies Q is. Okay. आता इथे काय घेतलंय? The negation. Here we are writing the negation. And the inverse of this statement. याचा inverse आपल्याला find out करायचा आहे. Just we have find out the inverse. आपण just find out केलेला आहे. If P implies Q is a conditional statement, then negation of P implies negation Q. हा त्याचा काय असतो? तर inverse असतो. And therefore, we find out the inverse of this statement first. To find out the inverse, मग याला काय? तर negation apply करायचं आहे. Negation in bracket negation of P implies negation of Q. Okay. Now the negation of negation P is the original statement. Okay. तर इथे बघा. Negation of in bracket negation of P implies negation Q is equals to negation of negation is the original statement implies negation Q. That is the negation of in bracket P implies negation Q is. आता इथे काय फाइंड आउट करायचं आपल्याला? तर निगेशन फाइंड आउट करायचंय कोणाचं? इम्प्लिकेशनचं. नाउ द निगेशन ऑफ P implies Q is a P and negation Q, and therefore this will become P and negation of negation Q. का की इथे ऑलरेडी निगेशन Q ला निगेशन आलेलं आहे. याचं निगेशन फाइंड आउट करताना काय करतो आपण? निगेशन ऑफ P implies Q means what? Keep this first statement as it is and apply the negation for the second. And therefore here first keep P as it is and apply the negation for this. That is a negation of in bracket negation of Q is a original statement, that is a P and Q, and hence the option A is a correct one. या ठिकाणी ऑप्शन A कसा आहे? तर तो बरोबर आहे. पुन्हा तुम्ही ते बघू शकताय. Okay. Next, if P implies Q is a true and Q and P is a false, then the truth value of negation of P or Q is. Now first, what is here? The implication आहे त्यामध्ये. That is a P implies Q. हा कसा आहे? तर तो true आहे. But when it is a true, that is a, if F implies P is F and Q is T, then it means that the given statement is a true. And next, what he say? That is a P and Q. As P is F, Q किती आहे? तर T आहे. Therefore, this will become false. मग त्यावेळेस P काय घेतलं आपण? So we are taking the P as F, Q as a T. Then what is the value of? That is the truth value of negation of P or Q. Now the negation of P. जर आपण P F घेतला आणि Q जर T घेतला, then the negation of P is T or Q means what? Again, it is a T and therefore T or T that is equals to T. This is the first case. Next, implication केव्हा true असतं, that is F implies F. That is, if we take P as F, Q is also F, then its truth value is a T. Okay, but here we cannot take P as a T and Q is also T because we have P and Q is a false. जर हा ट्रू घेतला आणि हा ट्रू घेतला तर आपल्याला काय पाहिजे तिथे तर फॉल्स पाहिजे. म्हणून आपल्याला इथे P काय घेता येईल, F घेता येईल, Q पण काय घेता येईल तर F घेता येईल. Therefore F implies F is true and F is a false. That's the correct one. Therefore the value of P is F and the value of Q is also F in second case. Now again we'll find out the value of negation of P or Q. Okay. Now what is the P? P is F, but it's a negation. A is a true. Or what is the Q? Q is F and therefore it's a truth value, that is a T. And therefore in both cases, if we consider P as F, Q as T, and P as F and Q as F, satisfying these two conditions, what is the condition? P implies Q असला काय असला पाहिजे तर true असला पाहिजे and P and Q काय असला पाहिजे तर तो false असला पाहिजे. In both cases, the truth value of negation of P or Q is TT. Okay, this is a T and this is a T. Therefore, the option B is the correct one. Okay, now the next question. The negation of P implies Q or R is. आपल्याला काय find out करायचंय? The negation. Therefore, we write here negation of in bracket P implies Q or R is. इथे negation apply करताना negation of in bracket P implies Q या or चा काय होणार? And होणार. Negation of R. Again, negation of P implies Q. What is the negation of P implies Q? Negation of P implies Q is equals to P and negation Q. And therefore, we write here P and negation Q and negation of R. And therefore, this can be written as P and negation Q and negation of R. And hence, the option D is a correct one. कुठला option या ठिकाणी बरोबर आहे? Option D is a correct one. Very simple question. जे फॉर्म्युलेज आपण या ठिकाणी अप्लाय केले ते तुम्ही नीट व्यवस्थित बघू शकताय. Now the next question. Negation of P implies in bracket P and negation Q. म्हणजे इथे पुन्हा आपल्याला negation अप्लाय करायचं आहे. Now see this. Negation of P implies in bracket P and negation Q. Okay. And therefore again we are applying the negation of implication. So negation म्हणजे काय? P and negation Q. Okay, this is equals to P and negation Q. Similarly here P and negation of in bracket P and negation Q. Okay, keep this P as it is. Now the negation of in bracket P and negation Q means what? Negation of P या and चा काय होणार तर or होणार. Negation of negation Q होणार. Negation of negation Q means what? Here is a Q and therefore we write here P and in bracket negation of P or Q. We apply here the distributive property, that is and is distributed over the or. Means what? P and negation of P or P and Q. Now what is the value of P and negation of P? P and negation of P. P ची कोणती व्हॅल्यू घ्या तुम्ही? T or F. And त्याचा and जर find out केला तर तुम्हाला by using this property it's a F. That is F or in bracket P and Q. It depends on P and Q and therefore the option is a C is option is a correct one. That's a P and Q is the answer. Option C is the correct one here. Okay. Now the next question. The negation of P or negation of Q and R is. Now we will find out the negation of this statement. negation of P or negation Q and R. Okay. Therefore, negation of in bracket P or negation Q and R. Okay. When we apply the negation, therefore here is a negation of in bracket P or negation Q, and this and will become or negation of R. Okay. Now the next we apply here the negation for this bracket, that is the negation of P. Again this or will become and negation of negation Q and bracket complete or negation of R. Now the negation of negation Q is the original statement, and therefore negation of P in bracket negation of P and Q or negation of R, and hence the option C is the correct one here. Okay, this is option C is the correct one. And in this way, what type of the question on first chapter logic will be asked in the board exam? Now we'll see in the next video. Till then, goodbye.